I will never forget the day when I first saw the old house on the edge of the forest. His gloomy silhouette rose among the trees like a reminder of long-forgotten times. This house was surrounded by many legends and rumors that were passed down from generation to generation. They said that it was cursed, that its walls kept dark secrets and horrors that could drive anyone crazy who dared to cross its threshold. But I didn't believe in these stories. I was a journalist, and my goal was to uncover the truth. I've always loved solving mysteries, and this house seemed like the perfect subject for my next story. I decided to spend the night in this house to prove to everyone that all these stories are just fiction. When I approached the house, the sun was already setting below the horizon, and the shadows were getting longer. I took the flashlight out of my backpack and turned it on, illuminating the old door. It was closed with a huge, rusty lock that seemed impregnable. But I prepared in advance and took the master keys with me. After a few minutes of fiddling, the lock gave in, and I was able to open the door. When I walked inside, I was greeted by the smell of dust and dampness. My hand shook as I held the lantern, the light of which flickered across the walls, illuminating antique furniture and cobwebbed corners. Every step echoed through the empty rooms, making it feel like the house was watching me. I began to walk around the house, exploring each room. On the ground floor, there was a living room, kitchen, and dining room. They were all deserted, as if no one had lived here for many years. On the walls hung old photographs depicting people in old-fashioned clothes. Their eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went. But what attracted me most was the staircase leading to the second floor. She creaked under my weight, and every step seemed to be my last. When I went upstairs, I saw a long corridor with many doors. They were all closed, and I had to make a lot of effort to open the first one. The room behind the door was small, with one window through which the faint light of the moon came through. In the center was a bed covered with an old blanket. But what surprised me most was the doll sitting on the windowsill. She was made of porcelain, with amazingly realistic facial features and eyes that seemed alive. I felt goosebumps crawling across my skin, but I chalked it up to my imagination. I put the doll on the shelf and continued my research. The next room was empty except for an old chest in the corner. I opened it and found old letters and diaries. My journalistic nature took over, and I started reading them. The stories described in them were full of tragedies and misfortunes that befell everyone who lived in this house. When I returned to the first room to get my backpack, the doll was again sitting on the windowsill. This time, her eyes were directed directly at me. My heart started beating faster, and I decided it was time to leave. But as soon as I approached the door, it slammed shut with a deafening roar. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw a shadow quickly approaching me. My flashlight began to flicker and soon went out completely. I was left in complete darkness, surrounded by sounds that seemed terrifying to me. I tried to turn on the flashlight, but it didn't work. Then I took out my phone and turned on its flashlight. The light illuminated the room, but the shadow disappeared. I was alone, but the feeling of someone else's presence did not leave me. I tried to find another way out, but all the windows were boarded up and the doors wouldn't open. I felt something cold touch my hand. I turned around and saw the doll slowly turning its head towards me. Her eyes burned with anger, and I realized that I needed to leave this house immediately. But as soon as I started to move, the room filled with creepy laughter. I ran towards the stairs, hoping to find the exit on the first floor. But as soon as I stepped on the first step, something grabbed my leg and pulled me back. I fell and hit my head, losing consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the basement, tied up and surrounded by old dolls. They all looked at me with their dead eyes, and I felt like fear paralyzes me. I tried to free myself, but the ropes were too strong. Suddenly, I heard a voice. He whispered in my ear, telling me how this house was built on the site of an ancient cemetery, and how his spirits still haunted it. I realized that I was trapped, and that the only way to escape was to solve the mystery of this house. My time was limited, so I began studying the dolls and diaries, trying to find any clue. The more I read, the more I realized that this house is not just a place, but a living being that feeds on fear and pain. When I found the clue, I was able to free myself and began to look for a way out. But the house did not want to let me go. The walls began to move, doors began to close, and I felt like something invisible was chasing me. I ran through the corridors, stumbling and falling, until I finally found a window that I managed to break. I jumped out and ran without looking back until I got to my car. I left that city and never returned. But I knew that the secrets of this house would remain with me forever. Sometimes I wake up at night from nightmares, in which I see the same dolls and hear the same creepy laughter. But I know one thing. I survived and was able to tell this story. Perhaps she will warn others from making the same mistakes. And maybe one day someone will be able to finally solve the mystery of the old house. Several weeks have passed since I left the damned house, but nightmares did not give me peace. I constantly saw shadows and heard whispers. My journalistic nature could not calm down. I decided to return and try to uncover all the secrets of this place once and for all. I gathered all my courage and headed back to that town. This time, I was more prepared. I took with me recording equipment, flashlights, batteries, and even a security guard whom I hired for my safety. When I stepped onto the threshold of the house again, a familiar feeling of anxiety came over me. The guard remained on the street, but I immediately felt that I was not alone. The house seemed to come to life, welcoming me back. I started writing down everything I saw and heard, every rustle, every sound. I went down to the basement, where I found more diaries and letters. Each of them told about the tragic events that happened to the inhabitants of the house. In one of the diaries, I found an entry about a strange room in the attic that was always locked. I decided to find it and explore it. When I went up to the attic, an old wooden door bound with iron appeared in front of me. With the help of master keys, I managed to open the door. Behind it was a small room filled with strange artifacts and ancient symbols on the walls. In the center of the room, there was an altar with a doll similar to the one I had already seen. As soon as I touched the doll, the room filled with cold air and the light began to fade. I heard a whisper that was getting louder. Suddenly, the doll began to move, its eyes glowing red. The whisper turned into clear words. The spirit inhabiting the doll told me about the curse placed on this house. It was created by an ancient sorcerer who sought immortality, but something went wrong and his soul was locked in this house. The spirit continued its story. The sorcerer was expelled from his tribe for using black magic. He built this house, hoping to find a way to achieve immortality, but his experiments led to a disaster that killed many. I realized that in order to lift the curse and free the spirit, I need to perform the ritual described in one of the diaries. But this required rare artifacts hidden in different parts of the house. I started looking for the necessary artifacts. Each of them contained part of the sorcerer's power. Having found the first artifact, an ancient amulet, I felt the house begin to resist my actions. Every time I found a new artifact, the house became more and more aggressive. Windows began to slam, doors began to close, and shadows began to move faster. I felt that there was less and less time left. During the research, I found an old diary belonging to one of the sorcerer's victims. It contained important details of the ritual. This diary became my ally in the fight against home. The last page of the diary mentioned a secret passage leading to a dungeon under the house. I decided to find him, hoping that it would help me complete the ritual and free the spirit. I found the entrance to the dungeon behind a bookcase in the library. After passing through a narrow passage, I found myself in a dark corridor leading to an ancient altar on which the rest of the artifacts were placed. I began performing the ritual by placing all the artifacts on the altar. The spirit of the sorcerer appeared in front of me, trying to interfere. But I did not retreat, repeating the ancient spells from the diary. The sorcerer tried to confuse me by creating illusions and summoning shadows. But I remained focused, feeling the sorcerer's powers weaken with every word of the ritual. Finally, the ritual was completed. A strong light filled the dungeon, and the spirit of the sorcerer disappeared, leaving silence behind it. The house began to collapse, and I realized that I needed to leave immediately. I ran down the corridor, trying to get out. The walls shook, pieces of the ceiling fell down. I managed to rush out of the house at the last moment when it completely collapsed. Standing at a safe distance, I watched the house disappear in a cloud of dust. I felt that the curse had finally been lifted, and the spirits that lived here had found peace. I returned home, tired but happy. I wrote an article about my adventure, and it became a sensation. Many didn't believe it, but I knew I did everything right. My life returned to normal, but the memories of those events remained with me forever. Sometimes I had dreams in which the spirits thanked me for liberation. Having become a famous journalist, I continued my research into paranormal phenomena. My experience with the cursed house became the basis for many future investigations. A few months after completing the house deal, I started receiving strange calls. No one spoke, but I felt a presence on the other end of the line. One night I heard a familiar whisper. It was the same voice that I heard in the damned house. He warned me of a new danger that was approaching. I started to investigate what this could mean. I soon learned about a new place, which was also associated with an ancient curse. It was an old monastery, abandoned many years ago. I decided to go to this monastery to find out the truth. The road was long and dangerous, but I was determined to finish what I started. The monastery looked even more ominous than the house. Its walls were covered with moss and its windows were broken. I walked inside and immediately felt that something sinister was living here. Inside the monastery, I found old books and notes from the monks. They described the horrors that had happened here many years ago and the curse that had been placed on the place. During my research, I met another paranormal investigator. He was also looking for a solution to the mystery of the monastery. We decided to join forces. We began to explore the monastery together, discovering more and more secrets. In one of the rooms, we found an ancient scroll with instructions for removing the curse. We began to prepare for the ritual. It was necessary to collect rare ingredients that were located in the darkest corners of the monastery. Every action we took was accompanied by strange phenomena. One night, we encountered the ghosts of monks. They were not hostile, but they warned us of danger and asked us to help them find peace. We found a hidden library full of ancient books and manuscripts. Here we learned that the curse is connected with an ancient reliquary hidden in the dungeons of the monastery. We decided to go underground to find the reliquary. The descent was dangerous. The walls of the dungeon were shaking, and every step could be the last. In the dungeon, we encountered a demon guarding the reliquary. He tried to scare us, but we didn't back down. As a result of a difficult struggle, we managed to defeat him. We found the reliquary and brought it to the main hall of the monastery. We were ready to perform the ritual and lift the curse once and for all. We began the ritual, following the instructions from the scroll. The entire monastery began to shake, and we felt the dark forces resisting our actions. During the ritual, demons interfered with her. We learned that the owner was killed because of her inheritance. Her killer still remained unknown. We decided to investigate and find the culprit. During the research, we found old letters and notes that pointed to a possible killer. We were close to a solution. We discovered that the killer was a close family friend who was jealous of the owner's wealth. He killed her out of greed and then fled. We handed over the evidence we found to the police and the case was solved. The ghost of the hostess thanked us and finally found peace. Our investigation into the mansion ended successfully. We felt that we had done another good deed and helped find justice. Soon we received a new task. We were invited to an ancient church where strange phenomena were happening. They said that the ghost of a priest who died under mysterious circumstances lives here. We arrived at the church and began exploring. We soon encountered the ghost of a priest who tried to tell us his story. We learned that the priest was killed during the service. His death remained unsolved, and his spirit remained in the church to seek justice. We began an investigation, trying to find evidence of murder. It wasn't easy, but we knew we had to help the priest. We found old letters and records that confirmed that the priest was killed because of his knowledge of ancient relics hidden in the church. We handed them over to the authorities, and the case was solved. After the investigation was completed, the ghost of the priest found peace. We felt that we had completed another mission and helped find justice. Our adventures continued. We were given the task of investigating an old lighthouse where people had seen strange lights and heard eerie screams. We arrived at the lighthouse and began exploring. We soon encountered the ghosts of sailors who died in a shipwreck. We learned that the ship crashed on the rocks because someone deliberately turned off the lighthouse light. We decided to find out who was behind this. We started looking for evidence. We found evidence in old records and documents that this was a deliberate crime involving pirates. We handed over the evidence we found to the authorities, and the case was solved. The ghosts of the sailors thanked us and found peace. Our investigation at the lighthouse ended successfully. We felt like we had helped yet another place get rid of its curse. We returned home enjoying a well-deserved rest. But we knew that our adventure would never end. There will always be a new place that needs our help. One evening, we received a letter from an old friend who told us about strange phenomena in his house. We decided to help him and hit the road. Arriving at the place, we learned that a friend's house was built on the site of an ancient cemetery. His family began seeing ghosts and hearing strange noises. We began research trying to understand the cause of the phenomena. We soon learned that the cemetery was the burial place of ancient warriors, and their souls could not find peace. We performed a ritual to help the souls of the warriors find peace. It was a difficult challenge, but we knew we had to do it. The ritual was successful. The souls of the warriors found peace, and the friend's house again became a quiet and peaceful place. We felt like we had done another good deed. Our adventures continued. We knew that there were still places that needed our help, and we were ready for new challenges and solutions, knowing that we were doing the right thing. Despite the successful completion of previous missions, I felt that there was something left unsaid. There was a certain final task that attracted me. Local residents spoke about an abandoned hospital where the most terrible human experiments took place. We arrived at the hospital. Its walls were covered with moss and cracks, and the corridors seemed like endless labyrinths. From the very beginning, we felt that this place was permeated with suffering and despair. We soon encountered the ghosts of former patients who suffered from cruel experiments. They were locked in this place. Their souls could not find peace. Each ghost told us its own tragic story. We began to explore the hospital, finding more and more evidence of the terrible crimes committed here. In one of the rooms, we found an old diary of the chief physician who described his experiments in detail. We performed the final ritual to free the souls of the patients and end the horrors of this hospital. This was the most difficult challenge we have ever faced, but eventually the light filled the building and all the spirits found peace. We returned home feeling that we had accomplished our mission. Now I could sleep peacefully, knowing that all the souls we had helped had finally found peace. Our adventure has come to an end, but the memories of all these places will remain with us forever. We knew we had made the world a little better and helped many find justice and peace.